He locked his wife in the tower to marry his mistress. England, January 1839. A storm-ravaged night at the Ashford estate. Captain Marcus Thorne of the King's Guard had 3 unshakable principles that had carried him through 20 years of exemplary service. Never disobey a direct order. Never interfere in the private affairs of nobility. And never, under any circumstances, allow emotion to compromise duty. On the night of January 17th, he shattered all 3 with a single blow of his boot against an oak door. He'd been standing in the freezing rain outside the East Tower for 10 minutes, listening to the sound that had haunted his patrols for weeks, a woman weeping. His superior's words echoed in his mind. Aristocratic marriages are not our concern, Captain. But when the weeping turned to a scream, Marcus stopped being a captain. His boot connected with the lock. With splintered, the door crashed inward. What followed was perhaps the least graceful rescue in the history of the King's Guard, and the beginning of the end of everything Marcus thought he believed in. Oh, astonishing, isn't it? But before we reveal how this incredible moment came to be, I have a question for you. Do you believe that destiny is written in the stars, or do we make it ourselves? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? I love reading you stories. Now, settle in, hit that subscribe button to join our family, and let me tell you the truth about what really happened. Happy New Year. As we enter 2026, I want to take a moment to thank you, wherever you're watching from. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions have changed my life and helped this channel grow beyond my wildest dreams. This year, I want you to remember one thing. Keep believing in destiny. We have so many more stories to tell together. Stay tuned. Now let's go into what really happened. The tower room was smaller than Marcus expected. Colder. A single candle burned on a crude wooden table, casting shadows that made the stone walls seem to press inward like a tomb. And there, pressed against those walls as if trying to disappear into them, was Lady Elara Ashford. Marcus had seen her once before, months ago at her wedding breakfast. She'd been radiant then, all ivory silk and hopeful smiles, the 23-year-old daughter of a distinguished family marrying into one of England's oldest dukedoms. The woman before him now bore almost no resemblance to that memory. Her gown, the same ivory silk, he realized with cold horror, hung loose on a frame that had shrunk to angles and hollows. Her dark hair fell in a matted curtain around a face that was all sharp cheekbones and enormous eyes. Those eyes fixed on him now with an expression he'd seen before, on soldiers who'd been under siege too long. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, unpracticed. "He'll have you hanged." Marcus was already moving, shrugging out of his heavy military cloak. 20 years of training meant he could function while his mind reeled. The room told its own story. A thin blanket on a straw mattress, a chamber pot in the corner, a tray with bread so stale it had turned green, a water pitcher, empty. The Duke's manor sprawled below this tower. Marcus had been posted there for 3 weeks, investigating reports of financial irregularities. He'd heard the laughter from the ballroom, smelled the feast from the kitchens, watched the Duke's mistress. Everyone knew about the mistress, drape herself in jewels at last week's dinner, while his wife starved 30 feet above their heads. "Forgive the dramatic entrance, Lady Ashford," Marcus said, surprised his voice emerged steady. He draped the cloak around her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, then grabbed the fabric like a lifeline. "But I'm afraid I'm about to make it worse. We're leaving." She stared at him as if he'd spoken in tongues. "Leaving? Now? Immediately? Can you walk?" She took a step and swayed. Marcus caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist. Through the cloak and gown he could feel her ribs, each one distinct. His jaw tightened. "Apologies for the impropriety, my lady, but walking is clearly optimistic." Before she could protest, he swept her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. The wrongness of it, a duchess reduced to this, sent rage burning through his chest. "You'll be court-martialed," Elara said, but she didn't struggle. Her head drooped against his shoulder as if even holding it upright required more strength than she possessed. "He's a duke. You're a captain who's about to have a very interesting conversation with his superiors," Marcus finished. He carried her toward the destroyed doorway. "Hold on to me, Lady Ashford. The stairs are narrow and I'm about to prove that military drills don't adequately prepare one for tower rescues in the dark." A sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh. "You're mad." "Quite possibly." The descent was treacherous. The tower stairs spiraled tight and steep, designed for defense, not convenience. Rain had blown through arrow slits, making the stones slick. Marcus kept one hand on the wall, the other locked around Elara, moving by feel and instinct. She'd gone silent, her breathing shallow against his neck. They emerged into a servants' corridor. Empty. The staff were all at the other end of the manor where the Duke was hosting what the invitations had called an intimate gathering. From this distance, Marcus could hear music and voices raised in drink. The Duke, celebrating freedom from an inconvenient wife not yet legally dead. "Captain," Elara's whisper was urgent. "Where are you taking me?" "Good question." Marcus's townhouse was 20 minutes away through streets that would be emptying as people headed home from their own celebrations. He had no carriage, no preparation, no plan beyond get her out. "My home," he said, making the decision as he spoke it. "It's not grand, but it has heat, food, a door that locks from the inside. You can't harbor me. I'm his legal wife, his property." The bitterness in those last words could have etched glass. "Then consider yourself stolen property," Marcus said. He shouldered through the servants' entrance into the storm. Rain lashed at them immediately, cold and vicious. He tucked Elara's head against his chest and started walking. Behind them, music played on. Nobody noticed the king's guard carrying a duchess through the rain like a thief in the night. Nobody noticed Marcus Thorne's perfect career beginning to crumble with every step. And for the first time in 20 years, Marcus found he didn't particularly care. The storm swallowed them. In the tower room above, the candle burned down to nothing. And in the ballroom below, the Duke of Ashford raised a glass to his mistress, certain his problem was solved. He would learn otherwise soon enough. Chapter 2. The Reluctant Sanctuary. Marcus's townhouse was dark when they arrived, which was a mercy. His housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, lived in the basement quarters and retired early. He managed the lock one-handed, Elara still cradled against his chest and shouldered inside. The front hall smelled of beeswax and old books. Respectable. Modest. Nothing like the gilded excess of Ashford Manor. Marcus kicked the door shut and stood dripping on his own floor, suddenly aware of the enormity of what he'd done. "Guest room is upstairs," he said, because standing paralyzed wasn't helpful. "I'll wake Mrs. Davies. You'll need everything." She needed everything. "I can walk now," Elara whispered. "Respectfully, my lady, I don't believe you." He took the stairs carefully. The guest room was at the end of the hall, small, clean, untouched for months. He set Elara on the bed and immediately stepped back, propriety reasserting itself now that the crisis had paused. She sat very still, his military cloak pooled around her like dark wings. In the lamplight from the hall, her face was ghostly pale. "Why?" she asked. Marcus had been asking himself the same question for the last 20 minutes. "Because someone needed to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have tonight." He moved to the doorway, needing distance. "I'll fetch Mrs. Davies. You need food. Slowly. Your stomach won't handle much at first." He'd seen starvation before in occupied territories during the border campaigns. "Captain Thorne." Her voice stopped him. "They'll come for me. When he realizes I'm gone." Let them come. The words surprised him with their vehemence. Marcus forced his tone level. Rest, Lady Ashford. You're safe here. He closed the door and stood in his own hallway, heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Through the wood he heard nothing. No movement. No weeping. After a moment he sat down on the floor outside her door, back against the wall. Guarding. That's what he told himself he was doing. Guarding a woman who'd been failed by every man who should have protected her. He didn't examine why his hands were shaking. Didn't question the rage still burning in his chest. Didn't think about his career, his reputation, his 3 cardinal rules lying shattered like that oak door. He just sat and listened to the silence that meant she was sleeping. Chapter 3. The Inconvenient Patient. Morning arrived with Mrs. Davies's scandalized shriek. Marcus jerked awake, still on the floor outside the guest room, to find his housekeeper standing over him with a breakfast tray and an expression that could curdle milk. Captain Thorne, there is a half-starved woman in your guest bed wearing nothing but your cloak and a rag that might once have been a dress, and you slept outside her door like a hound. Explain. Marcus stood, joints protesting. It's complicated. I gathered that from the impropriety radiating from every surface. She needed sanctuary. I provided it. He took the tray from Mrs. Davies's hands. She'll need feeding carefully. Broth first. Small portions. Mrs. Davies's sharp eyes missed nothing. Who is she? No one you need to know. The lie tasted bitter, but names were dangerous. A woman escaping a bad situation. That's all that matters. And you just happened to find her? I made a point of looking. He met her gaze steadily. Mrs. Davies, I need your discretion. No one can know she's here. The housekeeper studied him for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. 20 years I've kept your house, Captain, and you've never asked me to bend a rule. So when you break them, I suppose I believe you have cause. She pointed at the tray. Knock before entering. The girl's been through enough without you barging in. Marcus knocked. Waited. A faint voice said, Come in. Elara was sitting up in bed, still wrapped in his cloak. Someone, probably her own determination, had attempted to finger-comb her hair. She looked slightly less corpse-like in daylight, which wasn't saying much. Breakfast, Marcus announced, setting the tray on the bedside table. Mrs. Davies is a formidable woman, but she's kind. She'll bring you clothes. Hot water. Does she know who I am? No, and she won't ask. He poured tea with steady hands, a skill learned at diplomatic functions. How do you feel? Like I've been locked in a tower for 6 months. Her tone was dry, almost amused. Marcus looked at her sharply. You're making jests. Would you prefer weeping gratitude? She accepted the teacup. Apologies, Captain, but I used up my supply of delicate feminine hysteria around week 3. I'm running on spite now. Despite everything, Marcus felt his mouth twitch. Spite is underrated. It kept me alive when prayers didn't. She sipped tea, and her eyes closed in something approaching bliss. God, I'd forgotten what hot tea tasted like. The simple statement cracked something in Marcus's chest. He turned away, ostensibly to adjust the curtains, actually to master his expression. The doctor will visit this afternoon. Quietly. You've thought of everything. I've thought of nothing. I'm improvising wildly and hoping I don't get you killed. The honesty escaped before he could stop it. Do you regret it? Elara asked softly. Rescuing me? Marcus turned back. She was watching him with those 2 large eyes, waiting for truth. So he gave it to her. Not for a single moment. Chapter 4. The Library Campaign. 3 days passed before Elara was strong enough to leave the guest room. Marcus heard her first footsteps in the hall, hesitant but determined. He found her standing in the doorway of his study, one hand braced against the frame. You have books, she said, as if this were a revelation. Marcus looked up from his correspondence. Most literate people do. Military histories, philosophy, poetry. She moved into the room like someone entering a cathedral. Her fingers trailed along the spines: Locke, Milton, Wordsworth. Mrs. Davies had found her a plain gray dress that actually fit. She looked almost human again, though still painfully thin. The Duke's library was decorative. Leather-bound sets no one read. These are for reading. Marcus set down his pen. Help yourself, Lady Ashford. Elara, she said absently, pulling out a volume. If I'm living in your home wearing borrowed clothes, titles seem excessive. She opened the book, Locke's second treatise, and her face transformed. Oh, I haven't read this since before. She stopped. Before the marriage. Before the tower. Marcus could fill in the blanks. Take it to your room if you'd like. Instead, she sat in the chair opposite his desk, curling into it like a cat. May I read here? It's less lonely. Marcus should have said no. Should have maintained distance, propriety, the careful boundaries that kept this situation from becoming more complicated than it already was. Instead, he said, "Of course." They read in silence. Marcus tried to focus on guard reports, but his attention kept drifting to the woman across from him, watching her face animate as she encountered ideas she'd been starved for as surely as food. "He's wrong about this," Elara announced suddenly. Marcus blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Locke, here where he discusses conjugal society." She turned the book toward him, pointing. "He argues marriage is a voluntary compact, but then says a man has natural authority over his wife because he's abler and stronger. It's philosophically inconsistent. It was written in 1689. Different era. Bad philosophy doesn't improve with age, Captain." Her eyes sparked with the first real fire he'd seen in them. If marriage is truly voluntary, a compact between equals, then no party has inherent authority. Otherwise, it's not a compact. It's an acquisition of property with a religious ceremony attached. Marcus leaned back, intrigued despite himself. "You're arguing Locke doesn't go far enough. I'm arguing he contradicts himself to preserve social order, which is cowardice dressed as reason." She set the book down. "But then, cowardice often is. That's rather harsh on one of England's great philosophers." "Is it harsh or accurate?" Elara challenged. "You're a military man, Captain. If your superior gave you contradictory orders, would you praise his strategy or question his logic?" "I'd follow orders." "Exactly. You'd enforce the contradiction rather than challenge it." She smiled, sharp as a blade. "That's what philosophy does when it calls women's subjugation natural law." Marcus found himself smiling back. "You're quite fierce for someone I carried out of a tower 3 days ago." "I was fierce in the tower too. I was simply too weak to show it." She picked up the book again. "May I borrow this? I'd like to write a rebuttal in the margins." "Absolutely not. That's a first edition." "Then I'll use separate paper." "Do you have paper, Captain? Or is that also too precious for my feminine scribblings?" "Top drawer. Help yourself." Marcus watched her retrieve paper and pencil with the satisfaction of someone winning a battle. "Elara?" She looked up. "You may find my library inferior to debate partners at your father's house, but you're welcome to savage my book's arguments anytime." Her smile softened into something genuine. "Thank you, Marcus." It was the first time she'd used his name. It shouldn't have meant anything. It meant everything. Chapter 5. The World Beyond the Walls. Marcus returned to duty the next morning with dread coiled in his stomach. He'd sent word of illness. A mild fabrication that bought him 3 days but wouldn't hold longer. The King's Guard didn't tolerate absence, even from captains with spotless records, especially from captains who'd recently committed kidnapping. The Guard headquarters occupied a stone building near Westminster, all efficiency and echoing halls. Marcus reported to Commander Blackwell's office, spine straight, prepared for consequences. Thorne, you look terrible. Blackwell didn't glance up from his papers. Fully recovered? Yes, sir. Good. We need you back at Ashford Manor. The financial investigation has expanded. Now Blackwell looked at him. The Duke is accused of embezzlement from his tenants, falsifying ledgers. We need evidence solid enough to charge a peer. Marcus's mind raced. When do I return? Tomorrow. And Thorne. Blackwell's expression was unreadable. The Duke reported his wife missing 4 days ago. Claims she's mentally unstable, wandered off. There's to be a search. Marcus's face remained perfectly neutral through 20 years of practice. Tragic, sir. Quite. Though between us, half the peerage knows he locked her away to play house with his mistress. Still, she's his legal property. If she's found, she'll be returned to his custody. Blackwell shuffled papers. Just so you're aware. Of course, sir. Marcus left feeling sick. He went through the motions of his day, meetings, reports, patrol schedules, while his mind churned. By evening, he was due at a mandatory dinner for senior guard officers. He couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. The dinner was held at Lord Pemberton's townhouse, all crystal and candlelight and men congratulating themselves on upholding order. Marcus endured it, making appropriate conversation, until he saw her. The Duke's mistress, Charlotte Webb, a merchant's daughter with social ambitions, swept into the room on another lord's arm. She was beautiful in the calculated way of women who understood their beauty was currency. And around her neck, glittering in the candlelight, was a sapphire necklace Marcus recognized. He'd seen it in a portrait at Ashford Manor. Elara wearing it on her wedding day. Magnificent piece, isn't it? Lord Pemberton appeared at Marcus's elbow. Gift from the Duke, apparently. Generous man. Marcus's hand tightened around his wine glass. Quite. Shame about his wife. Though between us, I heard she was always rather difficult. Perhaps it's better she's... Pemberton made a vague gesture. Gone. Better, Marcus repeated flatly. Well, for him certainly. Man's entitled to happiness. Isn't he? Can't be held hostage by an unsuitable wife forever. Marcus excused himself before he did something that would end his career and possibly someone's life. He made it to the garden, the December air sharp in his lungs, and stood there shaking with rage he couldn't afford to show. Elara had been wearing rags in that tower, starving, while her jewelry decorated her replacement at society dinners. He left without saying goodbye to anyone. Chapter 6. The Late Night Confession. Marcus's townhouse was quiet when he returned, but light showed under the study door. He found Elara curled in his chair, her chair now, really, surrounded by books and paper covered in her precise handwriting. She looked up. You're back early. How was... She stopped, reading his face. What happened? Nothing. Marcus moved to pour whiskey, a habit he'd broken years ago. Routine dinner. You're lying. Badly. Elara set down her pen. Tell me. It's not your concern. Marcus. She stood, crossing to him. Tell me. So he did. The words came out clipped, brutal. The Duke's missing wife report. The search that was theater, not genuine effort. And finally, savagely, the sapphire necklace around Charlotte Webb's throat. Elara was very still. Then she laughed. A sound with no humor in it. That was my grandmother's. She gave it to me the week before she died. Said it was for my wedding day, that I should pass it to my own daughter someday. Her hand rose to her bare throat. I wore it once. Then he took everything. My jewelry, my clothes, my books. Said a woman in my position didn't need such things. What position? Inconvenient wife. Obstacle to his happiness. She turned away, arms wrapped around herself. I should have known when he started dining without me. When servants stopped meeting my eyes. When my bedroom door locked from the outside. But I kept thinking. Her voice cracked. I kept thinking it was temporary, that he'd remember he loved me once. Elara. He never did he? Love me. It was my dowry he wanted. My family's connections. I was just the inconvenient person attached to them. She looked at Marcus, eyes bright with unshed tears. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the hunger, not the cold. It was realizing I'd been so foolish. I married a man I barely knew because everyone said it was a brilliant match, and I was so flattered to be chosen by a duke. Marcus moved without thinking, closing the distance between them. You're not foolish. You're 24 years old. You trusted someone you should have been able to trust. And look where that got me. It got you here. Which is... He stopped, aware of how close they were standing. Aware of how her face was tilted up toward his. Aware that everything about the situation was wildly inappropriate and getting more so by the moment. Which is what? Elara prompted softly. Which is better than a tower? Marcus finished, but the words came out wrong. Too quiet. Too honest. Marcus. His name from her lips was almost a question. Why did you really break down that door? He should have lied. Should have cited duty, justice, moral obligation. Should have maintained the careful fiction that this was professional, impersonal. A captain protecting a citizen. Instead, he said, because I couldn't leave you there. Why not? You'd followed orders to ignore me for weeks. I know. What changed? Everything. Nothing. The sound of her weeping. The Duke's laughter. The wrongness of it all finally outweighing the rightness of obedience. I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I'm not keeping you here because of duty anymore. The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Elara's eyes searched his face. Then why? Marcus had spent 20 years mastering self-control. 20 years proving that discipline and duty could override any personal desire. 20 years building a career on being the man who followed rules because rules were what separated civilization from chaos. He was discovering that some things mattered more than rules. Because somewhere between carrying you out of that tower and watching you argue with Locke in my study, this stopped being a rescue. He raised one hand carefully, giving her time to move away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. And I'm not sure what to call it instead. I'm still married, Elara whispered. Legally, I'm still his. I know. This is impossible. I know that too. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing. What are we doing, Marcus? Something profoundly unwise. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I should step away. Maintain proper distance. Remember my position and yours. But you're not stepping away. No, Marcus agreed. I'm not. They stood like that, the space between them charged with everything they couldn't say, couldn't do, couldn't allow themselves. Finally, Elara opened her eyes. I should go to bed, she said, but didn't move. You should. Marcus agreed, but didn't release her. Marcus. I know. He forced himself to drop his hand. Step back. Remember who he was and what he'd sworn to uphold. Good night, Elara. She left without another word. Marcus stood alone in his study, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, and wondered when exactly he'd become a man willing to risk everything for a woman he couldn't have. The answer came immediately, the moment he'd heard her weeping in that tower and decided that orders were less important than conscience. He just hadn't admitted it until now. Chapter 7. The Hunter Circles. The next week brought paranoia. Marcus returned to Ashford Manor for the investigation, every moment aware that one slip could expose everything. The Duke was there, playing the concerned husband with theatrical perfection. Still no word of my poor Elara, he told Marcus over dinner, his mistress notably absent from the table. I fear the worst, Captain. She was never quite stable. Marcus smiled blandly. I'm sure she'll turn up, Your Grace. At home, Elara grew restless. I can't hide forever. You can hide until I find enough evidence to charge him. Marcus was working late every night, combing through the Duke's financial records. The embezzlement was there. Thousands of pounds stolen from tenant rents, falsified documents, bribes paid to officials. He's been robbing his own estate for years. To pay for her, probably. Elara stood at the window watching the street. Charlotte Webb. That's her name, isn't it? Marcus looked up sharply. How did you? I heard things in the tower. Servants gossip even when they think no one's listening. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly. She's beautiful, I suppose. She's wearing your necklace. I know. You told me. Elara turned. I don't care about the necklace, Marcus. I care that he put me in that tower to make room for her in my bed. I care that the law says I'm his property, that even with all your evidence, I'll still be returned to him because I'm his wife. Not if the marriage is annulled. On what grounds? I fulfilled my vows. He's the one who broke them. Cruelty, abandonment, which would require me to testify, in public, against a duke. Elara laughed bitterly. You know how that ends. I'm hysterical, unstable, a lying woman scorned. He keeps his title. I'm sent to an asylum, and you're court-martialed for harboring me. Marcus had thought through the same scenario 100 times. Then we find another way. There is no other way. The law doesn't protect women from their husbands. It protects husbands from their wives. A knock on the door interrupted them. Marcus and Elara froze, eyes meeting across the room. Another knock, more insistent. Stay here, Marcus ordered quietly. He descended the stairs, composing his expression into polite inquiry. Mrs. Davies was already at the door, arguing with someone. Not receiving visitors at this hour. Official business. A guard lieutenant pushed past her. Marcus recognized him. Lieutenant Hayes, ambitious and thoroughly unpleasant. Captain Thorne. A word. Marcus stepped into the hall, closing the study door behind him. Hayes, to what do I owe the pleasure? The Duke of Ashford's men are conducting searches for his missing wife. They're canvassing guard officers' residences. Hayes smiled unpleasantly. Standard procedure. You understand. Of course. Marcus's heart hammered, but his voice stayed level. Though I'm not sure what you expect to find. I'm investigating the man, not harboring his wife. Then you won't mind if I look around. It wasn't a question. Marcus stood aside, mind racing through possibilities. Elara was upstairs, in his study, surrounded by books and papers in her handwriting. If Hayes went up there, the ground floor should suffice, Marcus said smoothly. My bedchamber is upstairs, and I wasn't aware this search included pawing through a senior officer's personal effects. Hayes's smile sharpened. Touchy, Captain. Makes me curious what you're hiding. My privacy, which I value. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Search the ground floor. Satisfy yourself that I'm not concealing a duchess in my pantry. Then leave. For a long moment, they faced each other. Hayes clearly wanting to push, Marcus daring him to try. Finally, Hayes gestured to the men behind him. They moved through the rooms with insulting thoroughness, opening cupboards, checking behind furniture. Marcus watched, appearing bored, praying Elara had the sense to stay silent upstairs. After 15 minutes, Hayes admitted defeat. Seems you're clean, Captain. How gratifying. Marcus opened the front door pointedly. Do give my regards to the Duke. Tell him I hope he finds his wife soon. Hayes paused in the doorway. Between us, Thorne? Most of us think she ran. Can't blame her, married to that bastard. If someone were hiding her, helping her, I'd call them a decent man, not a criminal. Marcus's expression didn't change. Fortunately, that's a hypothetical, right? Hypothetical. Hayes tipped his head. Good night, Captain. The door closed. Marcus waited until the footsteps faded before ascending the stairs 3 at a time. He found Elara in his bedchamber, the only room with a lock, pressed against the wall, shaking. "They're gone," he said. "They'll be back." Her voice was thin. "Marcus, you can't keep doing this. If they'd found me." "They didn't. Next time they might." She pushed away from the wall, pacing. "I won't let you hang for me. I won't. You need to turn me in before." "Stop." Marcus caught her shoulders, stopping her frantic movement. "Listen to me. I'm not turning you in. I'm not letting him take you back. We'll find a way." "There is no way." "Then I'll make one." The words came out fierce, final. "Even if I have to drag the Duke's crimes in front of the king himself, you're not going back to that tower." Elara stared at him, breathing hard. Then, without warning, she kissed him. It was desperate, graceless, nothing like the practiced kisses of society flirtations. It was terror and gratitude and something fiercer, something that tasted like hope and felt like drowning. Marcus froze for half a second. Propriety, consequences, every rule he'd ever followed screaming in his head. Then he kissed her back. His hands framed her face, careful even in passion because she was still too thin, still healing, still legally another man's wife. But she was alive and fierce and choosing him, and Marcus had never wanted anything the way he wanted this impossible, disastrous, perfect woman. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elara whispered, "I'm still married. I know. This is treason against every social law. I know. We can't. I know." Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "But I'm not sorry. Neither am I." She laughed shakily. "God help us, Marcus. What are we doing?" "Surviving," he said. "Together." Outside, London went about its business, unaware that in a modest townhouse, a captain and a duchess were rewriting all the rules that bound them. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The end came faster than Marcus expected. He'd been building his case against the Duke for weeks. Evidence of embezzlement, witness testimonies from defrauded tenants, paper trails leading to falsified documents. It was solid, enough to arrest even a peer. He'd planned to present it to Commander Blackwell, then to the Crown Prosecutor, building a legal case that would strip the Duke of title and freedom. The Duke struck first. Marcus was at headquarters when the summons came. Not to Blackwell's office. To the commander's superior, Lord Chancellor Morrison, the king's own representative. The office was opulent in a way that made Marcus's modest home seem like a servant's quarters. And standing beside Morrison's desk, smug as a cat with cream, was the Duke of Ashford. "Captain Thorne." Morrison's voice was cold. "His Grace has made serious allegations." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Sir, he claims you've been harassing him during your investigation, making baseless accusations, overstepping your authority." Morrison steepled his fingers. "He also claims you've kidnapped his wife." "That's a lie," Marcus said evenly. The Duke smiled. "Is it? My wife disappeared the same night you were seen near my estate. Your own lieutenant reports suspicious behavior, refusing a lawful search of your premises." He produced a paper. "I have a warrant, Captain, signed by a magistrate, demanding the return of my legal property." "Your wife is not property. Legally, she is." The Duke's smile widened. "And you, Captain, are harboring stolen goods. That's theft, possibly kidnapping, definitely treason against the natural order." Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. "You locked her in a tower, starved her, while you paraded your mistress through her home wearing her jewelry. My private marital affairs are not your concern. They became my concern when you nearly killed her. Prove it." The Duke leaned forward. "Oh wait, you can't. Because any testimony from Elara would be inadmissible. A wife can't testify against her husband. It's the law, Captain. The law you swore to uphold." Morrison cleared his throat. "Captain Thorne, do you or do you not have Lady Ashford in your custody?" Every answer was a trap. Deny it and he was a liar. Admit it, and he was a criminal. Marcus met Morrison's gaze squarely. I rescued a woman from imprisonment. Yes. Then you'll return her immediately. No. The word dropped like a stone. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I said no. Marcus straightened to attention, as if standing before a firing squad. I will not return Lady Ashford to a man who tried to kill her through neglect. I will not hand over a vulnerable woman to her abuser. And I will not follow an order that violates every principle the Guard supposedly stands for. You're refusing a direct order. Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. Yes, sir. You understand that's grounds for court-martial? Yes, sir. Captain. Morrison leaned forward. I've read your record. 20 years of exemplary service. Not a single mark against you. Are you really willing to throw that away for this woman? Marcus thought of Elara in his study, arguing philosophy with the passion of someone rediscovering herself. Thought of her laughter, her strength, her refusal to break even when everything tried to break her. Thought of the way she looked at him like he was something more than a uniform and a rank. Yes, he said simply. I am. The Duke's smile vanished. Then you're a traitor to your class and your duty. No. I'm a traitor to a system that calls women property and cruelty a private affair. Marcus turned to face him fully. And I have evidence, Your Grace. Months of it. Embezzlement. Fraud. Theft from your own tenants. I was building a case against you when you decided to do this. Baseless accusations from a desperate man. Financial records. Witness statements. Documents in your own hand. Marcus smiled without humor. I've been investigating your finances, remember? You're a thief, Ashford. A common criminal with a title. And when I'm done testifying, your testimony will be worthless from a prison cell. The Duke's composure cracked. You think the law will side with you? A captain who kidnapped a peer's wife? They'll hang you, Thorne. Perhaps. Marcus's voice was steady. But I'll be hanged for doing what's right. What will you be remembered for? The door burst open. Commander Blackwell entered, followed by two men Marcus didn't recognize, Crown officials judging by their bearing. Lord Chancellor, Blackwell said, I need to speak with Captain Thorne immediately. This isn't. It's about His Majesty. He's requested Captain Thorne's presence. Silence. Morrison and the Duke exchanged glances. The King, Morrison repeated. Personally, Blackwell's expression was unreadable. Now, if you'll excuse us. Chapter 9. The King's Justice. Marcus had never been to the King's private study. It was smaller than expected, lined with maps and books, smelling of tobacco and old leather. King William sat behind a modest desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. Captain Thorne. The King looked up. You've caused quite a commotion. Marcus bowed. Your Majesty. Sit. I'm too old for formality when it's just us. The King gestured to a chair. Commander Blackwell has briefed me on your investigation into the Duke of Ashford. Impressive work. Thank you, sir. He also mentioned you've been harboring the Duke's wife. The King's eyes were sharp. That's a serious charge, Captain. I rescued her from imprisonment, Your Majesty. The Duke claims she's unstable. That you kidnapped her. The Duke is lying. Can you prove it? Marcus met his gaze. Bring her here. Let her testify. A wife can't testify against her husband. It's law. Then the law is unjust. The words were treasonous. Marcus said them anyway. Your Majesty, I've spent 20 years upholding laws I believed protected people. But this law protects cruelty. It protects men who imprison and starve their wives. It calls women property and calls their suffering a private matter. And I can't. I won't enforce it anymore. The King was silent for a long moment. You're willing to be court-martialed for this? Yes. To hang possibly, if necessary. For a woman you barely know. For a woman Marcus stopped, aware he was about to confess something even more dangerous than treason. For someone who deserves better than what our laws allow her. The king removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. I've been king for 9 years, Captain. In that time, I've learned that good laws protect the vulnerable, and bad laws protect the powerful from consequences. The law that makes women their husband's property is a bad law. He replaced his glasses. Unfortunately, changing it requires Parliament, which moves slower than continental drift. But I can work within its margins. Hope flickered in Marcus's chest. Your Majesty? The Duke of Ashford will be arrested today on charges of embezzlement and fraud. Your evidence is compelling. He'll be stripped of title and imprisoned. And Lady Ashford will be summoned to testify, not against her husband, but as a witness to his character for sentencing purposes. A legal distinction, but an important one. The king smiled thinly. And if, during that testimony, she happens to mention her treatment during the marriage, well, that would be relevant to character assessment, wouldn't it? Marcus's throat tightened. You're giving her a voice. I'm giving you both a chance. The king stood. But Captain, understand this. If the Duke is convicted, the marriage can be annulled on grounds of his criminal conduct. Lady Ashford will be free. But until that conviction, you keep your distance. No scandal. No more impropriety. I understand. Do you? The king's gaze was penetrating. Because I've read between the lines of Blackwell's report. You haven't just rescued this woman. You've fallen in love with her. There was no point denying it. Yes, Your Majesty. Then be patient. Let the law, the good parts of it, work. If you truly care for her, you'll protect her reputation while we sort this mess. And if the Duke is acquitted? He won't be. Your evidence is too strong. The king moved to the window. But Captain, you'll face discipline for your insubordination. Suspension, probably. You defied direct orders, refused lawful commands. I can't let that pass. I understand. Good. Now go collect Lady Ashford. Bring her to the Crown Prosecutor's office tomorrow at 9. And Thorne. The king looked back. Thank you for having the courage to break the rules when the rules were wrong. Marcus bowed and left, hope and terror warring in his chest. 2 months later, the trial was swift. Marcus's evidence was damning, and when Elara testified, poised, articulate, devastating. Even the Duke's expensive barristers couldn't salvage his defense. Guilty on all counts. 20 years in prison. Title stripped. Property forfeit to the crown. The marriage was annulled that same day. Marcus stood in the courtroom gallery, watching Elara sign the papers that made her legally free. She looked up, found him in the crowd, and smiled. The first truly unguarded smile he'd seen on her face. They met outside in the pale March sunshine. Captain Thorne. Elara's eyes sparkled. Or should I say, former Captain Thorne? Suspended for 6 months without pay, Marcus confirmed. He'd accepted the punishment without argument. Though they're calling it administrative leave to save face. What will you do with 6 months of freedom? I've been considering my options. He offered his arm. She took it and they began walking through the garden. I could travel, take up painting, learn to play the pianoforte badly. All terrible ideas. I'm open to suggestions. Elara stopped, turning to face him. I have one, though it's rather forward of me. I've noticed you have a talent for forward. There's a woman, recently freed from a disastrous first marriage. No longer anyone's property. In possession of her full dowry, returned by the crown. She stepped closer. She's looking for a partner. Someone patient, honorable, possibly too noble for his own good. Marcus's heart hammered. This woman sounds demanding. Extremely. She'll argue with him constantly. She's terrible at embroidery. She reads too much philosophy and has radical opinions about marriage law. Elara's smile softened. But she loves him. Rather desperately, actually. Desperately seems strong. She fell in love with him watching him break down a door. Everything after that was inevitable. She touched his face, the gesture now familiar and precious. So what do you think, Marcus? Should this woman make him a scandalously improper proposal? She already did. The moment she suggested he find her a partner. Then what's your answer? Marcus pulled her close, propriety be damned. They were in public, but she was free and so was he, and he'd broken enough rules that one more didn't matter. Yes, to everything. Forever. Yes. He kissed her there in the courthouse garden, and somewhere in London, society clutched its pearls. But Marcus had learned that some things, justice, love, the courage to break wrong rules, mattered more than society's approval. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony. Elara wore blue instead of white. I've been a bride before. This time I'm a partner. And wrote her own vows that quoted Locke and made half the guests uncomfortable. Marcus had never been happier. They lived in his townhouse, the one that had been her sanctuary. The study became theirs. 2 desks, twice as many books, endless arguments about philosophy that usually ended in laughter or kissing or both. And sometimes, late at night, Marcus would wake to find Elara at the window, looking out at the free darkness. Bad dreams? He'd ask. No, she'd say, turning back to him. Good ones. I'm just making sure they're real. They always were. The end. Dear viewer, what part of this journey touched your heart or surprised you today? If you'd enjoy more historical love stories filled with healing and hope, let me know below. Please like, subscribe, and share to help others find these stories too. Thank you for spending your precious time here. Your next beautiful story is waiting on the screen.